That's right. I recently just played the deck, and it's actually relatively good. Many people have concerns, and many people have wondered what to side out for this deck and what you can do to win the matchup or make the matchup a bit more easier for you if you're already win with it or against that matchup. So I want to go over a few cards on this list to basically discuss on what cards you could be playing to, I guess, sort of mitigate some of the dark synchro carnage that you might be facing. So without any further ado, let's just get right into it, because there's quite a few cards that we're going to be talking about, and two of them are kind of interesting and probably cards that no one's ever really talked about. And one of the cards is the Grave of the Super Ancient Organism. For those of you who don't remember this card came out way back in the 5Ds era. I want to say Raging Battle this card came out in, and it served to, I guess, be a counter to most synchro decks, and it kind of still is that thing. But what it does is all face-up level 6 or higher synchro or special summon monsters cannot activate their effects or declare an attack. So this is pretty significant simply because they can simply just they can't activate their effects. This is really good against for cards like Omega. It stops Crystal Wing, it stops Coral Dragon, it stops Trishula. So it's a really good card for that matchup, because it stops one of their bigger plays, and that's going into 3 Omega and into Crystal Wing Synchro Dragon. So it's a pretty good card. Another card that is in the same vein, is kind of similar, is Lose One Turn. Lose One Turn is very different from Super Graves and Super Ancient Organism. You can still activate effects under this effect. However, it does switch them to defense mode. They can't switch them back if they're a special summon attack position. It will negate their effects. So, for instance, if they special summon like Norden, they won't get the effect of Norden. If they can't get the effect of Coral Dragon, but they can get the effects of something like Omega, since it just banishes it up from the field. But they won't get cards like Trishula, or they won't get cards like Formula Synchron, simply because their effects would be negated. But it doesn't stop Omega, but it's still a really good card simply because it does do stuff like that. It also kind of mitigates some of the other problems in the deck as well. Next is you're going to want to try to stop their special summoning. So Vanity's Fiend if you're playing a Monarch deck, and Vanity's Emptiness, which I've always considered to be one of the greatest floodgates ever to exist. Vanity's Emptiness, for some reason, has not seen that much play, and I don't know why. There's a lot of special summoning going around. Sure, it's very easy to remove, but you realistically only need one turn to stop most decks anyway. Vanity's Fiend in particular is really good if you're playing Monarchs, because 1, you don't special summon all that much, and 2, this is only going to hurt your opponent more than it's going to hurt you, so it's really good. Next, you're going to want to banish. You're going to want to focus on their graveyard / their banishing. So cards such as Imperial Iron Wall, Soul Drain to an extent, and DD Crow. Imperial Iron Wall prevents PSY-Framelord Omega from banishing itself. However, you want to presumably activate this during the draw phase / standby phase. This card also stops Destiny Hero Malicious from banishing itself, so you can't really affect it, so that your opponent can't really use it all that much. It's pretty good that way. It also prevents other things from happening. It also stops Trishula's effect as well, so it's pretty good. Soul Drain is really good for those cards in the graveyard and cards that activate in the banish. So, for instance, it stops like Plague Spreader Zombie because it is in the graveyard. It stops Level Eater. It Skull Bulb. It stops other cards in the deck as well. I can't think of very many off the top of my head because I just completely forgot. But it is really good to stop those cards from activating in the graveyard, so it's pretty good. Next is DD Crow. DD Crow is really good simply because it allows you to banish your opponent's Destiny Hero Malicious. When they go into the Grepher play, when they discard Malicious for Grepher to special summon it, they can you can activate DD Crow. That means there'll be one short of a Malicious, and that means that they go try for a second one, they'll have to physically activate Grepher's effect and then send another one, which by that time they would be -2 because they would lose because they would lose the first Malicious, and now they have to send another one to the graveyard, which means they won't be able to just synchro up into a lot of other things. So it's pretty good in that aspect. Some other cards that are really good is you're going to want to stop Quackimir. If you're playing Blue Eyes, you're gonna play Quackimir Drago anyway, because this card really does stop them. It stops your opponent from special summoning PSY-Framelord Omega. It stops them from special summoning like Plague Sword Zombie and Domestos from the graveyard. It also stops them from special summoning Greffer from the hand as well. So it is pretty good in that aspect. It allows you to sort of mitigate that cause. A card that's less effective is Ally Justice Quarantine. It does only stop. It only stops PSY-Framelord Omega, and that might not be enough for this card to be warranted. But I think that if nothing else, if you don't have any side deck for that deck, this card is kind of an okay pick simply because of that reason. Also, battle traps, such as like Storming Mirror Force, Quaking, Drowning. These cards are very good simply because PSY-Framelord Omega has to activate during the main phase, and if they go into game with their cards, this card will be these cards will be there to stop them. I think the best bet though is Storming Mirror Force and Quaking Mirror Force, simply because Drowning Mirror Force is a lot more conditional than the other two. However, having the ability to flip your opponent's game state face down in defense position and not having them activate and not having them to be activated, and or shuffling their extra deck or their synchros back into the extra deck is really good. So it's a really good card. They're really good cards for this matchup. Two interesting cards before you get into the last three is Discord and Desynchro. Discord is what it says is neither player can synchro summon, but at the third end phase it's destroyed. It's to send this card to the graveyard. The reason why this card is good simply because your game's over by in 3 turns anyway. The game state is usually either 1 turn or 2. So you'll never see this card be removed off the field if you play your decks right, because you'll win from there. If you are playing a synchro heavy deck, then I wouldn't recommend side decking this card, but it is a really good card to note if you're playing a deck like PK Fire, Blue Eyes to a certain extent, because you really don't need Spirit Dragon to win the game, because you can make game breaking boards simply by alternative Blue Eyes Red Dragon and not Deep Eyes. Spirit of White, but this card is really good because it helps you mitigate some of your lost damages, and it's really good because it's a floodgate that stops PSY-Framelord Omega from happening. It also stops Trishula and stuff like that as well. And Desynchro, this card is a bit weird. It's slow, I admit, but I think it might have some potential if you're looking for a cheap alternative and you're not willing to spend, I don't know, the grandiose amount of money. Then again, Discord's pretty cheap as well. But Desynchro is really good because you can target one of your opponent's face up synchro monsters, and then basically just put their stuff back in, and then you can kill the materials off, because it's much easier to deal with a PSY-Framelord Omega with the materials of a PSY-Framelord Omega than PSY-Framelord Omega himself, simply because he can banish himself to counter this card. But it's also really good if you're facing down a Coral Dragon, if you're facing down a Crystal Wing Synchro Dragon, if you're facing down a Trishula, because it's much easier to deal with their material. Like I said, it's much easier to deal with those materials rather than dealing with the Synchro monster itself. So it's pretty good. And obviously you have the Solemn Brigade. Solemn Scolding is less so, but if you're playing a deck with no back row, with no set back row, Scolding is a way to go. Solemn Strike is obviously good because it stops PSY-Framelord Omega, it stops Trishula, it does all the things that you need. It stops pretty much everything in the entire deck, so it is pretty good. And the cost is pretty cheap. Same thing with Solemn Warning. You can just negate the synchro summon outright, and just have them lose it. Sure, PSY-Framelord Omega can recycle himself, but that doesn't matter when you're ahead on the board regardless. So it's pretty good when you consider all things are considered that way. So anyway, guys, tell me what you think about these cards in the comment section below. Tell me if I missed any cards, because there are probably a lot of other side cards that I probably have missed that I didn't talk about. So this has been Team Metamorphose, and I'm signing off. Later, guys.